Are you tired of being mortal? Is your limited perspective in space and time getting you down? Are you embarrassed by your lack of supernatural powers and devoted worshippers? Is there not a single church in your name? If this sounds like you, don't worry, I have just the solution. Why not become a god? Okay, admittedly, that's a little harder than I'm making it sound. I don't think there's any actual way to just become a god yourself, but you humans sure do have a lot of interesting ideas about this in your fiction. And hey, we already made a video about how to kill a god, so if you were paying attention, there should be at least one vacancy. So, at least according to the stories you tell, where do you start? How does one become a god? One of the best things in life is learning, which is probably why you're here to begin with. Unfortunately, not everyone learns the same. Public school is not a one-size-fits-all option, and I don't really think it ever can be. As a result, a lot of us creative types end up missing out on a lot of precious education. Fortunately, there is a shockingly easy, fun, and highly personalized way to get an education right from home. Learn all of your fundamentals, maths, sciences, computer programming, and more with our sponsor, Brilliant. Visit brilliant.org/Foundry to get 30 days for free and 20% off a year subscription. Seriously, this is the most fun you'll probably ever have learning this stuff. Try it out for free and be as brilliant as I know that you can be. The most popular conception of a god in our modern world is, capital G God, beginning and end of all things, creator of the universe, omniscient, omnipotent, and immortal. Wikipedia defines the word God as meaning the supreme being, creator, and principal object of faith. You're probably familiar. Unsurprisingly, a god like this often shows up in fiction too, being all-powerful and mysterious. It's rare that characters become a god of this sort, though. That would be kind of hard to do, wouldn't it? There's only one position, and it doesn't have a terribly high turnover rate. Rare for the end-all be-all one and only god of the cosmos to be replaced, but there are stories where it happens. In the series His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman, there's a Catholic church-like organization called the Magisterium, which worships a Catholic faith-like god called the Authority. The Magisterium believes this being to be, like the Abrahamic god of our world, the omniscient, omnipotent creator of the universe. Near the end of the series, as a war is waged against the Authority, the truth is revealed. The Authority is not the creator, but merely the first angel. After all the other angels came into being, the Authority lied to them, telling them that he had been the one who created them, which led the world to worship him as their creator. Eventually, however, the Authority himself is usurped by a different angel, because he isn't the omnipotent creator of the universe, and that's something you can only fake for so long. This is actually a really great demonstration of the main problem with becoming the capital G kind of god. It's got a very difficult to replicate primary requirement. You can't really be the creator god of the cosmos unless you first, create one, which is a pretty tough feat, even in fiction. Anything less than complete control over a domain of your own making falls short of the mold. But there are some examples that come pretty close. Think of all those stories where some mad scientist engineers a tiny civilization of people. Microcosmic God by Theodore Sturgeon, this episode of Rick and Morty, that terrifying messed-up sequence from Mark Twain Adventures where the kids meet the mysterious stranger. With the power to create and destroy life, and what appears, at least to those life forms, infinite power to manipulate this little reality, these figures do appear in some capacity like gods, don't they? At the very least, they're playing God, which is an interesting trope unto itself now that I think about it. Maybe there's a video in there somewhere. A little questionable whether they really should be considered gods, but still interesting as one of the more plausible ways to achieve this. For a more direct example, I'm going to step out of bounds for a second here. Look, I'm not necessarily trying to call it fiction, but the theology of the Mormon Church contains an irresistibly unusual example of this. In their scriptures, if you pay close attention, you find that especially devout adherents to the faith are promised their own worlds to rule over in the afterlife, essentially becoming gods in their own right. That itself is already pretty unique, but the really interesting exception to this hurdle of becoming an omnipotent god we were talking about is maybe a bit more controversial within the church. Some Mormons believe that God himself was once a human who ascended to divinity. The fifth president of the church, Lorenzo Snow, summed up the belief with a nifty little poem. As man now is, God once was. As God now is, man may be. It seems that more recent church presidents have backed away from that assertion, and it's now a less common belief, but I still find it a fascinating idea. A great circumvention of the idea that there can only be one ultimate creator god. But, like I said, not exactly trying to call this fiction per se. From what I can see, having multiple capital G gods like this isn't very common in fiction. In fact, off the top of my head, I can only really conjure up one instance. Andrew Hussey's massive, sprawling, and notoriously confusing webcomic Homestuck is, at its core, about four 13-year-old internet friends on the path to, essentially, become gods. The story is about the four of them playing a video game called Spurb that doesn't so much blur the line between cyberspace and reality as it does completely destroy it. The prize for beating the game? A brand new universe for you and the friends you played the game with. In fact, looking at it a certain way, Spurb could be said to be something of a god training simulator. Once the players have escaped the world-ending meteor shower triggered by starting up the game that destroys their real-life home planet, presumably causing billions of casualties in the process, don't worry about it. They're each given their own custom planet to quest on, complete with a population of sapient but dim-witted amphibian residents, their own monster to defeat called a denizen, a heroic mythological role to embody that shapes their character arc and themes their quest, and even a spiritual guide customized with the personality of a corpse of their choice. Each of them has a literal deathbed hidden somewhere in their world called a quest bed, which, if the player dies on it, will resurrect them with thematic superpowers, a special costume, and near immortality. After coming back this way, they can only die if the universe judges their death to be either just or heroic. To beat the game, they have to breed and hatch a frog that contains their new universe in its throat pouch. But not before they figure out how to use time travel and teleportation to ensure that they themselves are born in the past, because, of course, they've somehow been playing the game since before they were born. Nothing is ever simple in Homestuck. But that raises an interesting question because who created the players' original universes? And were they once players in their own session of Spurb? Like I said, it's Homestuck, so it's pretty confusing. All I know is that I'd be a seer of heart. Okay, so those are some examples of stories that kind of break this mold or get around the hurdle. They have multiple of these big creator gods that are omnipotent and rule their own universe. Here's the catch though. Even if they did create their own universes, the Homestuck kids hardly qualify as omnipotent or omniscient, right? And even if you are a very devout member of the Mormon Church, and you do become the all-powerful god of your own domain, are you really all-powerful? Isn't there technically a god above you in that case, who originally created you? In a weird way, these examples both sort of tread the line between being a capital G god and a lowercase g one. And that's an important distinction because becoming that type of god seems far more manageable. We already gave a definition for capital G God. Wikipedia describes the lowercase g type as a spirit or being believed to control some part of the universe or life and often worshipped for doing so. This kind of god is incredibly popular in fiction, probably owing a lot to their fallibility and the fact that there's more than one of them. Together, both of those things allow for interesting character interactions and conflicts that wouldn't be possible in stories with just a boring, perfect, capital G god. And these gods also frequently come from mortal roots. Somehow, at some point, they ascended to godhood. So, to the point of this video, how is that done? If you've spent any time at all playing the smash hit video game Baldur's Gate 3, you're probably very familiar with this loading screen. Apparently, the dead three, Baal, Bane, and Myrkul, were once mortal men, but ascended to godhood courtesy of the Lord of the End of Everything, Jergal. After a long and brutal journey, they just wandered up to him and demanded to be gods, and, lucky for them, he decided it was time to retire. And that might seem like a pretty singular experience, but they're far from alone. A lot of the gods of the Forgotten Realms started out as mortals, and in fact, one of the main ways that gods are created in this universe is by existing gods sponsoring the ascension of particularly exceptional mortals, almost like some kind of divine Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. For instance, Mystra, the goddess of magic, sponsored Azuth to become the god of the arcane under her, and later sponsored Savras to become the god of divination. You get the idea. But what if you don't have a patron deity who conveniently thinks you should be granted immortality and divine power? Well, luckily, in such universes, there's usually some sort of literal mechanism for this, a process you can follow, an artifact you can activate, a MacGuffin of some kind that will grant you what you seek, if only you can find it. In Brandon Sanderson's first Mistborn trilogy, the final empire is suffering under the brutal regime of the Lord Ruler, a godlike being with near limitless power. Later, it's revealed that he was once a simple Pac-Man who seized the power flowing from the mythical Well of Ascension, which only the prophesied Hero of Ages was supposed to do. Honestly, a lot of characters in Mistborn wind up becoming gods, come to think of it, and they usually follow a model similar to this. But interestingly, I think the most famous example in Mistborn is actually of someone who isn't really a god at all, just a human who conned a lot of people into thinking he was. The thief and revolutionary Kelsier sets up a plan in the event of his death to trick everyone into thinking that he's been resurrected. His plot works, and he ends up venerated as the god of a new religion, the Church of the Survivor. This is called deification, and unlike literal ascension, it's actually quite achievable, even in reality. Many ancient civilizations had a habit of deifying their leaders after they died, sometimes even when they were still alive. Roman emperors were considered to be partially divine in life, ascending to godhood upon their deaths. This led to the Emperor Vespasian, on his deathbed, uttering these incredible final words.
"Oh dear, I think I am becoming a god."
It wasn't just the Romans, though. Deified rulers or god emperors showed up in ancient Egypt, ancient China, the ancient Incan civilizations, and probably plenty of other places too. Even now, there are many cultures who still practice ancestor worship, possibly the easiest path to godhood, since all it really involves is dying. These are very different kinds of gods, though, ones with little, if any, supernatural power. So, do they really count? In our How to Kill a God video, we discussed killing gods by depriving them of belief and worship. If removing worship can destroy a god, why shouldn't adding worship create one? In the anime Death Note, a teenage boy named Light Yagami stumbles across a notebook that allows him to kill anyone he knows the face and name of. He immediately gets swept away by the idea of using it to purify the world of bad people and criminals, creating a new world, one that he will be the god of. It's important to note here that Light knows there are real gods of death called Shinigami. His notebook came with one. More importantly, he knows he's not one. So when he says he's a god, what exactly does he mean? He's not immortal. He has no sphere of influence, no worshippers, at least not at the time. His abilities are entirely dependent on an external object anyone can use, one that already belongs to an actual god, which he's just borrowing. Light is, of course, referring to one thing: power. The ability to choose who lives and dies has often been considered godlike. But could it really be that simple? Can an otherwise normal person be considered akin to a god just for having the ability to kill? After all, that power resides in nearly everyone to some extent. It's an interesting question. It is, technically, still power over life, in a manner of speaking. Another trait that's often referred to as godlike is having knowledge beyond human ken. In the Abrahamic story of Adam and Eve, eating the forbidden fruit is said to have made humans like God in knowing the difference between good and evil. In the video game Bloodborne, which is almost entirely about ascending to godhood, involves two factions arguing about the best way to do so. One of them believes that the key is knowledge, or as it's symbolized in-game, eyes. If you can manage to find and eat 3 eye-covered umbilical cords before the end of the game, thus lining your character's stomach, not just metaphorically, with eyes, you unlock an ending where the player becomes an infant great old one, sort of a slimy baby Cthulhu. But while the great old ones are definitely powerful and mysterious figures, it's worth noting that we don't actually know that they're gods in-game. Bloodborne leaves that, like so many of its other questions, unanswered. And while we're still on the topic of being godlike, there is a fantastic episode in the 2nd season of Star Trek: The Original Series in which the USS Enterprise is trapped by a powerful alien being calling himself the god Apollo on a planet that strongly resembles classical Greece. The crew starts off believing he's lying or delusional, but eventually they put together the shocking truth. He really is Apollo. He and the others of his species visited Earth thousands of years ago, and the pastoral ancient Greeks were awed by their displays of supernatural power.
The simple shepherds and tribesmen of early Greece? Creatures like that would have been gods.
In fact, they couldn't have been taken for anything else.
So, how do you become a god? Perhaps the answer to that question is as diverse as the gods themselves. Win a game, find an artifact, drink a potion, ask another god very nicely. But if none of that is working for you, if you're having trouble finding a deity to sponsor you or an artifact to grant you godly powers, maybe consider the fake it till you make it approach. After all, sometimes all it takes to become a god is for someone to believe in you. Of course, it might be a little easier to convince people if you did have godly powers, and that's, a little hard to achieve for human beings in the real world. I think the closest you can really come is mastery over technology, to become extremely educated and use what you know to influence the world around you. Unfortunately, education is exorbitantly expensive these days. Not everyone wants to go into a lifetime of debt just to get their career going, not even if it means a shot at deification. But it doesn't have to be that way. Our sponsor, Brilliant.org, can make all of that far more affordable and far more fun than it's ever been before. Brilliant really has been helping me broaden my horizons. I can always go to the site, click into a class, pick up where I left off, and take in a bite-sized piece of the fundamentals I've been missing. Whether it's maths, science, physics, anything and everything STEM, Brilliant has something for you. Lately for me, it was Brilliant's Thinking in Code class, which I feel is oddly appropriate for me. I can really feel it just opening up a whole new world to me that I had almost no idea was there before. Slowly but surely, as I educate myself in this way, the AI revolution isn't looking quite so intimidating anymore. And to be perfectly honest, it doesn't even really feel like studying. A lot of what you do on Brilliant might be better classified as mini-games. Look how interactive and fun these are. This one even has robots. Because Brilliant is so simple, moves at your pace, and starts at the very fundamentals, this is actually something that's really sticking for me. Almost like a personal tutor or coach. A legitimate, accessible, affordable, easy education, even for someone like me, with my head in the clouds and my face ever buried in fiction. And the best part? You can start for free. Visit brilliant.org/talefoundry or click the link in the description to get your first 30 days for free. The first 200 Tale Foundry fans to sign up for a yearly subscription to Brilliant will get 20% off, so definitely hurry. Those slots are going to fill up fast. Again, visit brilliant.org/talefoundry to get your first 30 days for free and 20% off a year subscription. Don't let something as simple as a lack of education hold you back. Try this out for free and be as brilliant as I know that you can be. Anyway, that's all for this one. Thanks for watching and keep making stuff up. I'll see you next week. Bye!